So as I said, you're at the 3 behavioral science insights to improve your healthcare product. This is for our Irrational Labs members and our Irrational Labs course takers. So whichever forum you're in, we recommend you go to the others. So if you're in the course, as you finish up, you will get an invite to join the community. That, of course, continues your access to all the Slack stuff, the Ask a Behavioral Scientist channel, all the great resources that we share there on the regular. Expect if you're coming in toward the end of the course, the end of your 3 months, you'll get a little notification if you want to extend for another year. Additionally, if you're a member and you haven't taken one of our courses, please consider taking our behavioral design course. This is like the 101. And then, of course, we have a finance specialization and a health specialization, which I know many of you are in. People always ask, what's the difference? The primary difference is case studies. We really just chalk the finance and health up with very health and finance specific case studies. Again, you know, we're a consultancy. So if you have a big, tricky business problem you need help with, we are here to help you. So remember, we can help with anything: product design, research and prototyping, marketing and growth, employee engagement, wellness. We can come speak for you. We can do custom trainings and we can do ethics trainings for your shadiest employees. But we are here to help in all those capacities. But for today, we are here to talk with Lindsay. She is one of the directors here at Irrational Labs. She's an expert in all kinds of things. She's actually brilliant. I mean, I should just say that and stop there, but let me carry on. She's particularly interested in interventions that make taking the daily behaviors that lead to long-term success, such as exercising or saving for retirement, not just easier, but more enjoyable and fun. At Irrational Labs, she focuses on designing and testing interventions in the financial and health domains. Before she joined Irrational Labs, she was a senior behavioral researcher at the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University, a behavioral science center committed to research to make people happier, healthier, and wealthier. Prior to coming to Irrational Labs and the Center for Advanced Hindsight, she worked for the Federal Government Accountability Office at NYU on a series of multi-site school interventions to reduce the racial achievement gap. Her research has been funded by grants from little, not very prestigious at all, organizations like the National Science Foundation, I kid, the Templeton Foundation, and she's been published in top psych and policy journals. She received her BA in psychology from Reed College and her MA and PhD in social psychology from the University of Virginia. And I always like to read her last line: in the service of the quest for enjoyable exercise, she's completed her 200-hour yoga teacher certification and 2 bar instructor certifications. It would be cool, though, if you were a yogurt instructor, Lindsay. Dare to dream. With that, like, I just wanted to highlight again, the cadence here for our members. Pamela, I love that laugh emoji. Yes, yogurt jokes go a long way. The cadence is always this. The second week of the month is Ask Kristen Anything. The third week of the month is one of our Irrational Labs people, one of our internal peeps, comes showcase something they've been working on, thinking about, want to share with our members. And then the fourth week of the month is one of these open events. So next week, our open event is Behavioral Project Design at Indeed, from definition to design. That's going to be super exciting with Rachel Rosenberg, certainly a leader in that field. And then, you know, April 13th, we go back to the Ask Kristen Anything. And just FYI, for the Ask Kristen Anythings, what we're going to do from here on out is we're going to highlight a teardown. You know, we're going to pick some really popular product. Kristen will do a teardown, then we'll go into the AKA. So it should be exciting, but not as exciting as the treat Lindsay's going to give you today. So Lindsay, take over.
Okay, let me move all my different screens around.
I know this is always the tricky thing. You know, it's like the 100 screen problem.
Okay.
All right, you feeling good though?
I think so. I'm trying to make the pictures of people bigger, although not many people have their video on, so maybe I don't need to worry about that after all.
Yeah, and I might spotlight you actually. So, I mean, it's up to you. Do you want to spotlight or do you want to see people?
I guess see people, because it's a little tough for me to see the chat, or maybe I can pop it out. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. It'll be fine. People can talk as they need to talk.
Right.
So
Sounds awesome. Enjoy, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you for the intro and thank you everybody for joining. I am super excited to talk about this with you all. I obviously love behavioral science and I love thinking about health and how do you make things easier for people to do these hard things that we ask about them in the service of health, right? Like eating right, exercising. And so let's talk it through. That was the wrong direction. There we go. So I don't know who here has a healthcare product. If you've got your video up, raise your hand. Are you building something? Yes, exactly. Peter, Norbert, maybe some others. So I don't know which of these areas you might be tackling. These are some that I have seen or used, like myself. And obviously, these are health problems, but you're in a behavioral science membership. It's because you know that they are also behaviors, right? People need to be taking these behaviors and thinking about how do you change the circumstances in which they're making the decision. So of course, the classic econ model, the rational human being, you're thinking about your user and you're like, oh, why aren't they signing in? Why aren't they taking their meds and doing their PT and all of these healthy things that I have built this app so that they can use it? And there they are skipping. And in the traditional sense, you would give them information, right? But the behavioral science perspective, the behavioral design perspective, I'm gonna make this a little bit of a Q&A. Who can tell me what these are? And I'll give you hints for each one. So anyone know the first foundational concept of behavioral design? This is a nice illustration. You've probably seen this one before. Or I built one specific to what I often grapple with, which is present day bias. Getting some trouble clicking. Click, click.
It's okay. We're all just thinking about the cake.
Dissonance, intention, action gap. Exactly. So this is the, should be illustrating the idea that we're making choices that don't necessarily align with our best future self, right? We're making choices in the moment that then undermine our long-term goals. So I do this more than I'd like to admit. I like put on my little exercise clothes and then I even roll out my mat and then I like just am checking my emails in my fitness clothing. So people aren't always rational. You're making these impulsive, present focused decisions. Okay, next one. What does this cue you into? This is calorie counts on a menu. Pamela, I see that you said the decision-making context matters. That's good. Useless information, eat a burger. Exactly. It's that information is not going to change your behavior often. It's not going to be enough for you to overcome the circumstances, the environment. Exactly. And then this last point, what matters for changing behavior? What will reduce the amount of snacks that someone is eating? Pam said this one, it's the environment, it's the circumstances. So those people who come into this kitchen from the right side are less likely to eat snacks because they have to walk those extra steps to the snack bar from their coffee machine. Exactly. I'm tired. I'm not spending extra effort if I can avoid it. And so with those three ideas in mind, it means that you can take those to your healthcare product. And that's what I'm going to talk about here is how do you apply this perspective, these insights in the context of a healthcare product. I'll break it down into a couple different points. I'm having a terrible time here. I am not normally on this computer and I'm not used to its finicky ways, but change the environment. So instead of skipping an appointment, this is truly nightmarish. I'm so sorry. Basically, all of this noise coming in, how are you going to break through it? Okay. And what are we going to work on? So in this talk specifically, I'll think about information overload, right? How are you presenting information to people? What are you asking them to process? Thinking about designing for emotions, feelings, making it fun, And then finally thinking about timing. And so originally I had played with this. I was really trying to make it easy for you all to remember. And I was like, okay, it's F's, it's feedback, it's feelings. And I just could not get there on that last one. So silent F, reminders. So that's what we'll go through today. And this first one, thinking about feedback, is basically don't give people too much information. They can't process it. And so here we go. This, right? Infographics, dashboards, risk presentations, all of this is overwhelming for someone to process, especially if they are new to a healthcare circumstance, right? If they have just recently received a new diagnosis, giving all of this information and expecting them to know how to deal with it is a really high bar. And we often talk about this in behavioral science, thinking about paternalism. And how do you strike this balance between letting people make autonomous decisions versus telling them what to do? Often why they have gotten an app or why they have gone to a provider or they're looking for these tools is because they need guidance. And so to the extent that you are an expert, you have medical advisors on your team, think about using that insight, using that expertise to narrow things down, to make it easier to process, to understand, right? Rely on those experts in your team. Here we go. And of course, people do avoid information that is scary. And so thinking about the cadence, the sequence in which you give people information, what you're asking them to do with it is all very, very complicated. So I'll give examples throughout of products or apps, websites that are doing this well. This is from Apple. I was poking around on their site. I don't have an Apple Watch, wish I did. But basically, right, they have thought of a very simple way to convey a lot of information and to give you actionable steps around that, right? So you're not just giving information for the sake of information, you're giving information that says, close your move ring. And the way you close your move ring is you move around some. Close your stand ring, stand up. Close, what's the other one? I think it's maybe Fitbit, sleep ring, right? That's a good one.
It's move, exercise, and stand.
Stand, move, exercise, stand. So like steps versus hustling.
Yeah, I just checked my watch to help you out.
Have you closed your rings? Are you taking the actions that they want you to?
You had to call me out. I haven't been able. No, my rings aren't very big. That's not nice of you, Lindsay. Carry on.
So Apple does a really nice job here. Oh my God. Okay, next one. And the interesting thing about so much healthcare app is basically it's giving you feedback on your body, right? Moving, your heart rate, your breathing, your sleep. The body gives really bad feedback. And so you'll want to think about, what do I need people to do with this information and what's the lag? So who here has ever weighed themselves a lot? Maybe you're thinking about fitness, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to bulk up. If you weigh yourself a lot, what happens? Is it reliable? Is it steady? No, I'm seeing some head shakes. That's because it's terrible. Much like, I loved this graph. This was from the 2020, the Christmas edition of BMJ, but it's always peer-reviewed journals. And basically this author is trying to lose weight. He's like looking for homeostasis. I think he's spending a lot of time in his house, right? Given that time point. And you can see he's weighed himself in rapid succession, multiple times at a time point and multiple times throughout the day. And basically what he finds is that his weight fluctuates. Maybe you too have had this experience. I have had this experience, but I'm not putting my graph up on the board. Basically, wild fluctuations in the body based on how recently you went to the bathroom, how much water you've been drinking, whether you just sweat a lot, you sat in the sauna. And so these fluctuations make it incredibly difficult to use the body, to use perhaps weight feedback, especially on a short time horizon, as a good way to give feedback on things like diet changes, right? And so thinking about what you're measuring and what people can do with it, how noisy of a measure that is really crucial when you're thinking about healthcare products, which often give this sort of information. Okay. So this is an example of a product that is working around this. Dan Ariely worked on this product. We did some guidance on it, thinking about a scale that doesn't give numbers, right? So then you're not dealing with this fluctuation. One of the other nice things it does is it smooths across a 2-week period. And so it takes out some of that noise, the standard deviation. Instead, you're working with a running average, and it's coding sort of, you're holding steady. That's positive if that's what you've told it your goal is, or you're making these changes and you can decide accordingly. But this is a nice way to ease out some of that bad feedback that the body gives otherwise. This one, Levels, is a nice app. It is a glucose reader and basically gives you a sense of more immediate actionable feedback. So in the context of thinking about blood sugar and maintaining your blood sugar, keeping it smooth, you can get much more rapid feedback. Oh, that made you spike. Now you know in the future that that's probably not, you maybe don't eat as much cookies if you're trying to keep your blood sugar low. Steady. And then this next one, I'll jump to thinking about feelings and emotions. Basically, you want to think about adding positive reinforcement along the way, right? So back thinking about COVID vaccinations, it can be a little bit of a hassle to get a shot. Many different companies jumped on that chance, both for branding opportunities, but also sort of as a public good measure. You can see you could get free weed, you could get free donuts. It's a nice way to stack on these immediate incentives rather than sort of this long-term abstract benefit, which of course healthcare really is. Health, think about what health is really. You're making sacrifices in the moment for long-term future gains that aren't even really gains. This, I think, is the crux of health and why it's so behaviorally difficult, because best case scenario, I'm turning 70, 80 years, like the body will just get worse, right? Like it's, until the technology gets a little bit better, the body will steadily decline. And so health isn't even about gains. Health is about slowing declines. And that is so unspeakably unmotivating. You really have to think about, what can I do in the here and now? How can I make this better for my users, for everyone who's trying really hard, but it just isn't reinforcing. There's nothing, there's little about it that's really immediately motivating. So another example here, thinking about how do you layer on emotions. This is a classic piece of research by Katie Milkman. You've probably heard of her. She does a lot of really incredible gym research, basically. How do you get people into the gym? She's done work with 24-hour fitness. This is one of her earlier ones where she was looking at how can we basically bribe people into going to the gym. And so she calls it temptation bundling, which in this study was looking at, can you get people to come to the gym by basically holding their audiobook hostage? So this was a few years back, and so Harry Potter was real big, Hunger Games, and she downloaded those on iPods that students could only access after they swiped into the gym. So you could, I guess, go to the gym and just listen to the iPod and while you sat there, exactly. But she basically, what they found was people weren't just coming in to listen, they were doing their exercises, and they came about 1.5 times more. And then this one is a point that I really like. People understood that this was helping them, that holding their treats hostage basically was a nice motivator to get them to the gym, and they were willing to pay Katie some extra money to continue letting them stay, continue holding their iPods behind these lockers at the desk at the gym, which I really like. So you see this push-pull, this tension, right? Like, I want the things that I want, but I also know that I need to lock myself in, right? Someone earlier in the chat said pre-commitment, and that's a great solution, thinking about healthcare and healthcare products and offering those moments for people. I think we often hesitate, I think especially in health, to give people those options for locking themselves in, but it can be really powerful. And you see with apps that limit for instance, screen time, people are excited and willing to buy into that kind of thing. And so maybe this is an exciting direction in a new context and a new domain. I use Obey. I don't know if anybody else does. You can be my Obey friend. But the nice thing that I think they do really well, they're an online gym platform. They make it very easy. Of course, you're removing barriers, but they also have what's functionally a white label Zoom. And so you can invite your friends wherever they might be to do a workout class with you, and all your videos are up. I do this with my best friend. She lives in New York, and it's a really fun way for us to do a little bit of exercise. And then at the end, we get to catch up. I'll pause and then sort of shift, because another way to think about positive emotions is something that makes something feel more meaningful, a ritual. So maybe if you want to drop in the chat, what are some of your daily rituals that help you do things? Meditation. That's a nice, I do this and then this, yeah. Ryan, dropping your kid off at school and then you go to the gym afterward. Stretching, skincare. Skincare is a nice one. Yoga and meditation. Yeah, all of these things are ways to sort of take a moment for yourself and refocus. And I think there's something really interesting about this line between a habit and a ritual, right? Because both of them you might do every day, but one, habits, right? You're trying to make them really automatic, right? How do I get my user to make this a habit? How do I get them to not think about it, but just go ahead and sign in? And a counter version of that is, how do I make this a ritual? How do I make it not mindless? How do I make it more mindful, right? A couple of people called out meditation. I really love that. Thinking about how could you ritualize some things and bring more focus to someone so that then you could basically make more thoughtful choices. Yeah, cooking. I love this one. So this is a study that was done by Mike Norton, Francesca Gino, and others, but I would say those two really specialize in thinking about rituals. And they asked dieters, they recruited dieters who wanted to eat less, who were trying to lose weight, and they gave them a ritual to perform before meals that then over the time that they were tracking them led to a reduction in calories compared to their control group. And then they brought it into the lab and they said, you can eat carrots or you can eat candies, just sort of gave them free rein to see what people chose. And if you didn't have a ritual assigned to you, you picked a chocolate. Makes total sense. If you did have a ritual, you picked carrots. You made healthier choices. These are still dieters. So ideally they were choosing carrots because they were trying to lower caloric intake. And there's a funny thing here, which is they have a condition that I didn't put on the screen here, which is just meaningless gestures, but you still are doing them before you make your decision. And meaningless gestures are almost as good as rituals, which I think is kind of funny. You'd want to untangle how much is a ritual about pausing and moving people from a hot to a cold state versus how much is a ritual about a particular cognition and a particular sort of mantra that goes along with it. And I don't know that they have untangled that quite yet, but you can see that both would work, but slightly different psychological mechanisms. So maybe that's something you could test. Do you give people just a pause, or do you give them a pause and an affirmation, for instance? This is a mock-up for a blood pressure product, blood pressure app that we were working with. And you can see it's pretty straightforward. One of the things you need to do when you're taking your blood pressure is you need to relax, you need to pause, you need to calm. You can't have just run up the stairs, you can't be stressed. And so we thought it would be really exciting if we could layer a ritual onto that. So the key screen here is that third one where it says, put your hand on your heart, take a deep breath, and focus on yourself. And then the thought is that reinforces this behavior, this moment. It makes the blood pressure reading something to look forward to, something that then you're more likely to do, not because it's a habit, but because it's this moment for yourself. It's this moment of pause. It's this moment of refocus. And then in addition to thinking about positive things, I really, really, really advocate for failure design. You have to plan for failure. And so sort of the existential question here is, what is the path of goal pursuit? What does it look like to pursue a long-term goal? And my son is 3. We just were reading this book and I loved these illustrations. I was like, this is a perfect example of the different ways that you could achieve your goal. So these are the prim penguins, basically. And you can see goodly, lovely, angel, neatly, and perfect, always march. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They make very steady progress, very, very smooth. And this is one way that you could conceive of goal pursuit, right? I set a goal, I pursue it single-mindedly, nothing ever goes wrong for me. Or maybe you're a tacky, and tacky always marches 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 6, 0, 2.5, 0, right? Tacky's path is a little bit hit or miss. It's a little bit disjointed. There are starts and stops and fits, and you have to come back. And I don't know about you. Are you a tacky? Are your users tacky? And do you need to plan for these disjoints? There's a reference down at the bottom, Hannah Machance. She does some really interesting work that I really love, thinking about long-term goal pursuit. And basically, the process of long-term goal pursuit is not ad astra to the stars, nothing ever goes wrong. Part of long-term goal pursuit is the process of recognizing new opportunities and restarting. You have to constantly be returning to your goal, because there are so many other goals in your life, right? You couldn't possibly commit yourself to one thing unless, maybe you're an Olympic athlete and you have the money and the resources to say, I do nothing but swim all the time, right? But for health products, you want to think about building slack for people. And so in this example here, this is a study again with dieters. And basically, Zealenberg, I think this is probably one of those me searches where, he had a bet with someone, do cheat days work on a diet or not? And what they find is that cheat days don't really change weight outcomes at all. They're just as good as being on a steady diet across the way. But what you do find, at least in the short-term period, is that cheat days make it a little bit easier to stay on the diet. And so maybe it becomes a little bit more sustainable to maintain this change if you know that you have this day coming up where you can take a break, where you get to eat a little bit, something extra. So you can see diets are hard. No one is as motivated 2 weeks in as they were when they started, but they're not as discouraged if they have this cheat day. Positive affect also stays up when you have this cheat day built in. Another example is, here we go, emergency reserves. So this is not the same as a cheat day. You're not planning for it in advance, but when you do mess up, you have this slack, this extra. And so this was about step goals. How many days per week do these participants hit their step goals? If they have an easy goal, you can see about 3 out of 7 days. If you have a hard goal, they make it a little bit less. Hard goals are harder. But then you can see in these 2 conditions where you give people slack, in the weekly reserve section, you have, I think, 2 days where you can say, ooh, I didn't quite make my goal, but please give me a check for my streak anyway. And then in the monthly condition, you can roll them over across time. And you can see both of those are quite good at getting people to, even when they miss, come back. And that's really where you see the difference here in the reserves, is that after people have a bad day, you avoid what we at IL call the what the hell effect, and just people give up for the week. When you have reserves, when you have slack, then you come back. It's easier for you to take that fresh start. So this one here, Duolingo, they do streaks. There are 2 different things on the screen here that are designing for people who have sort of meandering goal pursuits. If you see, there's this streak freeze, which is basically, can you plan for a cheat day ahead of time? There's streak repair, which is that emergency reserves. Both of those are helping people keep their motivation even when life gets in the way, right? And that's what you need to design for. You need to design for life will get in the way. It's inevitable. Best intentions are not always going to work out the way you need them to. And so giving people flexibility. And then the last big bucket for minders, silent F, is thinking about the timing and what you can do to make it easier. One question, based on 3Bs, isn't ritual counted as a friction or a barrier? In that it seems like you're asking people to slow down, I guess, is that the question, Amy? So if that's the proposal, it's one of the things where this is sort of, if friction removal is BE 101, I think friction addition is like BE 102, BE 201, where you start to think about, do I always want to make it as easy and thoughtless as possible for a user? Or are there places where I do want them to engage and be thoughtful and make a different decision? So you'll see it's counter perhaps to like defaults, make it as easy as possible. But instead, a ritual is a way to move you from an emotional present bias, give me immediate benefits now, to on occasions where we want people to make thoughtful choices, helping them slow down.
Yeah, Lindsay, I just want to jump in really quickly. When we do the kickoff call, we talk about this, and it's generally most people we work with, we have to remove barriers, but you know, it's always barriers with an asterisk, because like the most famous medical example I can think of in terms of adding a barrier is Atul Gawande's checklist. You know, where he had the emergency room staff go through this whole checklist with the team, and it reduced fatalities by some absurd percentage. Also, they use it in policing and bias, right? So when a cop pulls somebody over, they go to a checklist, they get into a cool headspace before they go engage with the person that they've just pulled over. I think, to Lindsay's point, these aren't our first things. The first things we do generally are not add barriers. It's kind of a third, fourth level thing, but sometimes it's just what the doctor ordered. So just thought I'd add that 10 cents, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I don't think our first line of defense would be build in pauses, add friction, but certainly sometimes it is the right tool, and you can use friction like with any behavioral science tool. You can use it for good and for sludge, right? And so being thoughtful about where that is can make it really impactful. This one should be maybe a gimme, given that I had that section header up on defaults for quite a while. So here are two company examples. What happens when you are a company 2 versus a company 1? Why is the blue bar so much higher and has such great participation in their retirement savings program? It wasn't informational brochures. Exactly, opt out, defaults. This is a very strong way to get people to participate in something. And I will say, health is tough with defaults. And so depending on what your product is and what you are having people do, right? Like you don't necessarily want to default people, for instance, into organ donations. That's a classic one. And ultimately, there's some reanalysis. Dan Goldstein did this work. I think he was very smart and thoughtful about it. Basically, like, even if you get more people signed up for organ donation, does it translate into more organs donated? Often it doesn't, because the person who has the ultimate decision power on organs is the family. And if you have defaulted someone into organ donation and they haven't talked about those wishes, made it explicit with others, you don't necessarily end up getting the follow through that you might hope for. And so it can be more powerful in some cases to not default, but you want an active choice. There was some work in Canada. I'm going to take us on a detour. Canada had people sign up for organ donations at the DMV. like many places, but they used that time where people were waiting at the DMV to ask them to review a brochure about it and then make an active choice. And because you have this captive audience, it's a little more likely that they will read this information that you're providing them. It's just in time, it's as they're making the decision. And they found that they got, I think, roughly equivalent rates of participation, but increased likelihood. They haven't followed for quite long enough for everyone to die. Hopefully no one dies. But basically the engagement and the thoughtfulness that goes around that decision means that ultimately you're going to get sort of the societal outcomes that you were looking for more effectively. So defaults with an asterisk, just like that, barriers with an asterisk. But all to say, in a healthcare product, depending what you're trying to get people to do, you should default them. And so especially thinking about, can you remind people, can you make it feel like this is the natural flow of things to participate or to exercise 3 days a week, right? Like, how do you set these guides so that people understand what's normal, what's encouraged, what's recommended? So calling back to COVID, but this also works quite well if you have a double dose vaccination like HPV, you just go ahead and you schedule the return. Your dentist does this, right? Like, oh, let's go ahead and schedule your follow-up visit for 6 months from now, right? And then I've got you. You pre-committed, you put it in your calendar. And so when you can get things on the calendar, make it feel like a little bit less of a choice, make it feel like a strong recommendation. This is the norm. This is what an authority figure is helping tell you, helping you understand this complex thing, health. That is a really nice way to encourage follow through to increase behavior. And then of course, can you remind people? Thinking about timing, thinking about reminders, you want to just make sure it's still top of mind. People get distracted, right? Cognitive overload, coming back to the beginning. You have so much going on, so put it on the calendar. This is some work we did with a large retail pharmacy. They had a very strong messaging infrastructure. And what they started doing was for people on maintenance medications who didn't have automatic refills set up, they sent out a simple reminder. And they did it. What I think is fun about this one is they sent it right after you picked up your prior fill, and it seemed to come from the pharmacy. It seemed to come from the pharmacist. And so in addition to getting people to take this action, it was, there was a little bit of accountability. There was a little bit of personalization there. They said that they got a lot of replies to the message where people were like, oh, thank you. Or like, oh, not a problem. Love picking up my medication. Good to see you. Which of course is not normally the vibe with the auto reminders that come out from your pharmacy. And then here we go, direction. This is another thinking about COVID and reminders. UCLA was looking at reminders versus nothing. Do they work? And then reminders by themselves versus reminders. You can see the text here. It says, claim your dose. So using psychological ownership. And what they find is that reminders are great, whether they have ownership or are just, hey, come and get your flu shot, not flu shot, your COVID shot. And that's nice. Ownership is a little bit stronger. So if you can think about making it feel like this belongs to me, this is already yours, this is reserved for you, those cues are nice ways to trigger a little bit of loss aversion. This is mine, I need to take advantage of it. We also did work like this with Livongo, right? Claim your welcome kit was a nice one to get people to engage more with this diabetes management product. And the other thing that I really want to call out on this graph, why I've put up all of these bars, even though the pale ones are basically the same as the reminder, is that your reminders don't have to have a lot going on. So they had a reminder text, and then they had a reminder that came with a video. They had ownership text versus ownership that came with a video. The video is not getting you much. And so don't kill yourself. If you just have to send a little text message reminder, that can do a lot. This last one is an accountability example. Katie, you probably know Katie, you've seen her in Slack, one of our managing directors. She said I could put her on blast. She is doing physical therapy right now, And she's using an app to help her remind. You schedule them, you do it in the app. And, you know, PT, people got a lot of, people are busy, much like flossing your teeth. You're like, yeah, I'll do it. And you do it for a little while after you have your appointment. And then you do it the night before you go in again, right? But in this case, you have to mark your exercises as complete. And at least in theory, her therapist can see that she's been doing these exercises. And she said it has helped her to stay engaged a little bit more. She's not 100% sure if they're actually tracking, but she knows they could. And so that accountability is helping her follow through the way she might. And so thinking about accountability, certainly we talk about accountability buddies, but even the app, as a computer, as an AI, you can get into some interesting monitoring things and sort of figuring out what that calibration is a nice one. I like it a lot as an area that is maybe not leveraged as much as it could be. So I'll sum up and then I'll take some questions. Basically, feedback, cognitive overload. Really try to think about in your behavioral health product, what you are asking people to process. What sort of information are you giving? Is that information good information, or is it like 11 weight measurements in a day? And then what can they do with it? Giving people guidance on how to take an action based on what you've given them. Emotions, feelings, you want to make things positive. So can you make it bundled with something that is emotionally pleasing, something hedonic? Can you give people a ritual? And so it might not feel positive, haha, so fun, but maybe it's positive, meditative. And then designing for failure, thinking about how do I overcome bad emotions when those happen. And then finally, last one, thinking about timing, defaults, of course. If you can default people, give them strong norms, give them that guidance, and then lock people in with calendar reminders, with appointments scheduled. All of that is going to really help ensure that people come through taking the actions that you want them to. So with that, I'll open it up. I already see a hand raised.
Okay, and Evan's going to jump in, but also I was just putting the chat. If you have questions, put them there and I'll call you in order. That's also super easy. But take it away, Evan. Tell us how things are out east.
Thanks. Hey there. So I work at one of the retail pharmacies that also has a telehealth option associated with it. So we were able to do both the prescribing and the fulfilling. And if you take like birth control as an example, there are retail products that you can use like condoms. There's birth control pills that come in a variety of different, options. And how would you say, like what we were thinking is simplify the decision making by showing the different trade-offs that someone might be making between all different types of birth control methods. But on the one hand, like that could simplify, but on the other hand, it could introduce cognitive overload because it's like we're framing it as a decision, and you said not to do that. How would you suggest navigating something like that so that we get more people booking appointments for a telehealth visit about, or something around birth control prescribing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I assume you're leaning towards slightly more reliable forms and moving people towards sort of a prescription or something.
Yeah, it's like finding people who are maybe just using the retail products and then moving them towards something that's more healthcare oriented when they're not necessarily feeling confident in just the retail side, or maybe they don't like it for some reason.
Yeah, I like that. I think decision matrices and comparison charts are generally positive. You can like get them too large, certainly. I think one of the things that's nice about them is that if you do them right, you can talk about downsides in a way that is transparent, and you shouldn't hide downsides, right? You don't want to trick people into joining a product or whatever that then is going to be wrong for them, right? That's problematic for the pharmacy, it's problematic for them. And it can be a nice way to increase trust in a recommendation if you do make it really clear and explicit. These are the risks, these are the downsides that you'll be grappling with. They feel like they make an informed decision, they trust you more. And there's some work on that in a credit card context, and people end up being much happier with the product, more likely to stick with it over time. In the healthcare context, I think I would probably, thinking about birth control, let's be concrete, I would probably keep the buckets pretty large. And so I have like barrier methods, pills, like long acting inserts, I guess. Inserts probably not the word, but like devices, long acting devices. And I wouldn't get into like the details and the nuances of like, is this pill versus this pill versus this pill and those trade-offs. But I'd keep it high level. And then I would probably frame it around benefits and emotions. So it's like not quite a jobs to be done sort of frame, but I think really making sure you're thinking about the user and what the user is interested in solving for. And you said this a little bit, right? Like they're anxious about the retail methods not working for them, right? So thinking about how do I frame this chart and this decision aid in a way that resolves them through those emotions, right? Catering it in that way. Is that helpful?
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome.
And do you think like putting all this on one page is going to be overwhelming? Like here's the overview of our birth control page and shows all this stuff, or is there a way to phase it?
I'd probably phase it. I might have people opt into that by like curious about other methods, or like had a scare and looking for something more reliable, something that then helps them cue into like, this is the right opportunity for me, this is the right time, and then you don't have to throw it at everyone who might be overwhelmed.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. We're going to go to it's the Jersey boys. So we're going to go to Jean. And let's see if Jean's walking around somewhere. But Jean, go ahead and come off mic and ask your question. Oh, you are walking. Look at you.
I got to stay on brand. Yes, thank you very much, Lindsay. This has been great. I'm very fascinated with rituals. And I loved how you talked about that. I'm curious, like, what are the hallmarks or criteria that you might think of to make a ritual an effective ritual? Like, what makes a ritual, I guess, effective is what I'm looking for. What makes a ritual rather than a routine, or what makes a ritual special so that it actually has the effect that you're wanting it to have? Like, I think of rituals like lighting candles and saying prayers and listening to certain music and incense and that. So like, how do you kind of build that into a healthcare product?
Yeah, it's sort of an open question. I mean, you saw the one example we had, and I would encourage you to look up Mike Norton. He's at HBS or Columbia. Maybe I think he's at HBS, but he does a ton of work on rituals, and he might have the academic answer for you. Given what I know of his work and what I have read in other contexts, I think the biggest point for a ritual is that you're drawing focus. So it should be something that people have to concentrate on, that they have to engage with. You don't want it to be a habit where it's like easy, automatic, I don't have to engage. And so I think, like you're saying, right, like physical actions that we're all doing together, physical cues that say like, now there are new smells, now there's new oral input, like all of that helps cue in that like, this is a new space, this is a new mindset. I think that things that demarcate beginnings and ends are really, really powerful thinking about than making this feel like something unique.
Thank you.
That's
That's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. To Dr. Beard, where are you at? And then Norbert. Let's see.
I'm here. I'm trying to unmute.
Okay, well, we heard you. We heard you. I just see if I can
Okay,
stop.
so, all right, thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. My question, Lindsay, is the 3 insights that you shared this morning. Are you aware of any research that's done specifically for smoking cessation?
Some, but I'll be honest, smoking cessation is not like really my focus area. So I'll tell you what what I think about. Certainly, I think smoking is a big ritual. I think that there's a lot of work in the context of smoking cessation that is all about cues and automaticity. And this is true, I think, for harder drugs as well, but also smoking. So much of smoking is not just the nicotine, but it's the physical cues, right? It's the smells, it's the physical sensation. I get to take a little bit of a walk, I get to see my friends if they're also smokers. And so in that way, I think rituals and figuring out how you replace those rituals in an effective way is really key for smoking cessation. Like, what are the cues and the things that made that lovely and rewarding and emotionally rewarding, not just like the physical hit. And so that's one thing that I would really lean in on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. And to Norbert, and we're in Virginia, right, Norbert?
North Carolina,
So close.
Charlotte, yeah. Lindsay, thank you so much. This was really great. I think Jean just kind of touched on what I had on my mind as well. So I was very intrigued by the basically extension of from habit to rituals, and I'm still trying to now that you basically triggered that, I'm probably trying to get a better understanding. You mentioned just Mike Norton, because I see like with rituals almost like another level of habit, but then of course there are certain reasons why you probably want that frequency of the habit where people don't think, like in the prescription refills and so, right? Even though you might somebody might argue maybe you can introduce some rituals there as well, who knows? But no, my big takeaway today was really that that introduction of rituals in basically that connection of habits. So I'm still not sure if I want to try now to change, well, to evolve all the habits that I'm trying to create and turn them into rituals, or if perhaps there is some moments of celebration once in a while where habits can lead up to a ritual. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how to approach this?
Yeah, I wouldn't encourage turning all habits into a ritual, right? Because then you do run into, now this is a barrier, right? I got to think deeply about brushing my teeth and flossing, all of these things. Some of them do need to be pretty mindless and automatic. And so certainly, like, I just don't have time for everything to be a ritual. But what you can, I think figuring out how to make the moments of celebration special, and could you involve people in that and like make that piece ritualized? Maybe that's a nice way. That's a good intuition.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any additional questions? We have room for one more. And if not, I see, Kristen, do you want to verbalize what you've been posting? Or did you vanish? It's like the Where's Waldo moment. Awesome. Well, if we have no other questions then, thank you all for coming today. Remember, we're here in the Slack to help you out. The Ask a Behavioral Scientist is our most popular membership feature. So we have scientists always answer your questions over there. Remember, there are great resources all over Slack to help you out. And we're here to help you out. So please reach out in Slack, over email, whatever you need. And should you need even more help, we can help with that as well. We can get you some consulting support or training or whatever you need. So thank you all today for your time. I did have one more smoking thing I was going to put in there. Art Markman is a professor at University of Texas, Austin. And he does stuff with habit substitution, which is similar to reward or temptation bundling. So check that kind of summary of his work out there as well. But we hope you all have a brilliant weekend, and we hope to see you next week when we learn about what Indeed does to inspire their users. So thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.